Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Fireside, or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by Gesshoo, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by me, Britt. Fireside Chapter 2 The Bedlam. Tally holds her breath as the biddies split like water around stone and flood into the gazebo. They each grab one of the extra cushions and settle down around the outer rim, and then they're grabbing goblets and pitchers and pouring each other wine, and all the while, General Alder stands at the top of the gazebo steps. Her hands are tucked into the pockets of her suit pants as she watches, waiting, and Tally has never seen her look so casual. It's absolutely jarring. It's stirring. Yes, her insides are actually stirring. General Alder had stuck her hands in her pockets, and the goddess herself had stuck her hand down Tally Craven's throat and swirled up her guts. Tally's eyes twitches, stinging from her utter lack of blinking as she stares and stares. Her throat burns like fire from holding her breath, and her chest is starting to ache. But Tally can't make her lungs work, and she can't make her eyes blink. All she can do is sit there, stunned and thirsty. Why? Why did M take her wine? Don't they know Tally is parched? Tal, Raelle whispers beside her, and Tally physically jerks. What? She barks, the word jumping out in an awkward yelp that draws everyone's gaze directly to her. Oh, goddess protect, Raelle mutters around a barely contained laugh and drops a hand on Tally's knee. As Raelle squeezes her knee and leans over, Tally's eyes fix again on the general, only this time, she finds the woman's bright blue eyes looking right back. She watches as that fiery gaze flicks down to where Raelle's hand touches her, then up to Raelle's mouth now hovering near Tally's ear. She watches as the general's eyes narrow just the slightest bit, and there's a flicker there. A flicker of something Tally might interpret as jealousy if she saw it in any other gaze, on any other face. But the general's face? General Sarah Alder? Jealous of Raelle Collar touching Tally Craven? Whispering discreetly to her? Tally had to physically stop herself from vocalizing the psh that echoes immediately through her mind. No, there's no way. Especially since Raelle's whispered words are, well, less than enviable. Tal, you've got to relax, Raelle says, squeezing her knee again. You're gonna, pass out or fart or something if you don't just chill out and breathe. And, do you really want to be farting in front of General Alder? A guttural sound ripples up from Tally's throat, and she tries to discreetly shove Raelle away from her. But Raelle topples over into Gregorio, who smacks into M, who glares at all of them like they're considering wind striking them out of the gazebo if they don't get their shit together in the next 5 seconds. So, General Alder says once all her biddies are settled, and Tally's gaze snaps right back to her. Once more, she finds blue eyes looking back, but the connection lasts only a second. Then the general is glancing about the gazebo as she speaks, meeting each of their eyes in turn. For those of you unfamiliar with the tradition of Fireside, we will begin with ritual. I've prepared an end-of-year blessing for each of you, as well as one for your coven for the coming season. Once we've completed the blessings, I and my dashing ladies here. Tally physically keens as the general sends a wink towards the biddies, seated in an arc behind them, and the 7 women hum a collective chuckle. Oh no, Alder is being charming. We'll be settling in with you all for a while for some bonding. General Alder takes her hands from her pockets and steps more fully into the gazebo. She stands stiffly again, despite not being in uniform or on duty, and Tally figures it's got to be near impossible to ever stay completely relaxed when you've been standing at attention every day for 300 years. We can talk more about that when it's time, but if you are all ready and not too inebriated to stand without falling, we can begin with the blessings. Some of us are pretty inebriated, ma'am, Raelle says, stifling a laugh, and Telly shrivels and shrinks as if the words are a bright neon sign slapped into the air over her head and pointing straightly down at her with a giant blinking arrow. This idiot right here, General. Just a hair's breadth away from being mullered out of her mind, as her mother used to say. Sorry, ma'am, Telly says, cheeks heating to a near unbearable degree. Whether from humiliation or arousal, she isn't sure. General Alder is still wearing that suit. That suit. With no shirt. Telly's eyes twitches again. Her steering stomach quivers and drops. She swallows down the dryness in her throat. Definitely arousal. I didn't know we'd be doing this. Tally, please. The General replies with the easiest smile Tally's ever seen on her face. And something in Tally shifts like water at the sound of her name on that tongue, wrapped up in that voice. Tally hasn't heard it. That searing, perfect combination since right after she was made young again. And suddenly, she isn't still water or even rushing river. She's full tide, rising, rising. She can feel the rush in every part of her body. There is no need to apologize. I want you. Tally's breath hitches as the General's eyes lock hard on hers again and freeze. The tingles riding her spine scream like banshees all the way down, and Tally has to stop the sound from finding its way to her throat. To enjoy yourself. All of you. The General breaks the eye contact and turns, and Tally's breath wheezes free. She sags, a bit of tension sapping, but her own gaze never falters. It remains right where her body wants it. Right where her body is screaming for it to be, on the creamy expanse of the General's bare naked chest, the visible sides of her breasts peeking out of the open edges of her peridot blazer. Tally's mouth waters. Her spine bows a bit, and she stiffens, presses her hands to her knees, and silently tells her body to chill the hell out. She's thankful her dress is long enough that she can sit cross-legged and still be covered, unlike Abigail, who sits mostly with her knees tucked to the side. As I said, we will touch more on that in a bit. General Alder continues and reaches out to take a small green velvet bag from one of her biddies. She tucks the bag into her pocket and carries on. For now, let's begin the blessings. Tally, I'll come to you last so you can have a moment to gather yourself. Tally reddens like a tomato again, but nods. Thank you, ma'am. That's enough of that, yes? General Alder says. No more calling me ma'am for the rest of the night, Tally, or any of you. In fact, we can dispense with formalities altogether. I will address you all by your chosen names, and you may all address me as Sarah. Oh no. Sarah? Tally fends her face and avoids the 2 amused stares she can now feel boring into her cheeks from either side of her. Abigail and Raelle, the 2 goddess-damned demons she'd been cursed to love more than anything else in the world. General Alder. No, Tally corrects herself. Sarah. She shivers and bites her bottom lip, puckering her smile. Sarah moves with such grace and ease, it's impossible not to watch her. She flows like water around the ring of them, slipping around the fire and reaches her hand down to Raelle. Raelle stares at them for a moment, a little unsure, but she reaches up and lets her hand grasp Sarah's, until he feels an odd spark of jealousy. Oh, don't be stupid, she tells herself. She decides to be stupid anyway, pouting as she watches Sarah gently pull Raelle to her feet. The pouting turns to a grumble when Sarah's hands slide up from Raelle's palms to her inner wrist. We begin, Sarah announces, and all the witches in the circle sit up taller and bow their heads. Tally takes one last look at the 2 of them touching, then drops her chin and closes her eyes as well. There's a bit of shuffling, the sound of material rustling, a throat clearing, but then everyone seems to settle, and the collective energy finds its stride. Tally feels it around her and does her best to center her mind. She's floaty and hot, but her spine is straight, and her throat is blessedly free of cheese. So she figures she's doing pretty well for someone who was sneak attacked, post-drinking way too much, by an unexpected ritual and a searing hot general. "A blessing on you, my daughter," Sarah quietly says to Rael, and it's like an instant calm. Tally feels it tug her toward peace. As Sarah continues speaking, the words mesh and meld together like music. Sarah's work emanating out and around them, and Tally settles into the rhythm like meditation. She tunes out the quiet words being murmured, because they aren't for her, and focuses instead on the melody. Her belly is warm and buzzing, and she's so entranced that she hardly even notices the blessing's end. But then, there's a shuffling beside her as Rael retakes her seat, and, "A blessing on you, my son," Sarah begins, and Tally knows it's Gregorio's turn. Tally is so blissed out by the uncharacteristically gentle work as Sarah winds her way around the circle that she startles when she hears Sarah's quiet voice suddenly right above her. "Tally." Tally blinks open her eyes to see Sarah standing right in front of her, hovering above like the goddess herself, peering down at her drunkard child, amused, affectionate. She glances quickly around the circle to find everyone seated with their eyes closed, each now bearing an individualized mark on their foreheads from Sarah's blessing. Different colors, different shapes, all small and lovely. "Are you ready?" Sarah asks softly, and Tally glances up again to find her hands outstretched toward her, open and waiting. Tally takes them without hesitation and lets Sarah pull her to her feet with ease. "Hi," she whispers stupidly as she stands face to face with the woman who's been haunting her dreams since Tally was debiddied. Debiddified? Unbiddied? Whatever. The word doesn't matter, because Sarah is smiling softly at her and holding Tally's hands, and Tally is only wobbling the slightest bit on her heels, her stupid, stupid heels. Her stupid, uncomfortable heels. Can I actually... Tally feels her face go nuclear again, burning bright. She can feel it all the way to the tips of her ears. "Would it be okay if I take my shoes off first? They're super uncomfortable." Sarah's smile tweaks just the slightest bit, widening only for Tally. "Of course." Tally wiggles out of them in record time, Sarah holding her steady all the while, then straightens her back again and squeezes Sarah's hands. Sarah's hands that she is holding. They're holding hands. Tally has to fight the urge to fan her face again. Has to fight the urge to fan her entire body when one of Sarah's eyebrows arches toward her hairline, and the woman quietly asks, "Good?" Tally nods. "I'm ready." But then Sarah's fingers are sliding up from Tally's palm to the insides of her wrists, thumbs rubbing gently back and forth, and Tally doesn't think she's actually ready at all. "A blessing on you, Tally," Sarah says quietly. Much quieter than she had done the others, Tally thinks, and she's the only one Sarah calls by name. It isn't "my daughter," and she'd addressed Rael and Abigail, or even "my child" as she'd refer to Em. It's just Tally. Only Tally. And something about that makes Tally's entire body shiver. Sarah lets go of Tally's right wrist to retrieve a small item from the bag in her pocket. A tiny stick of deep reddish brown. She holds Tally's gaze and smudges the stick over Tally's forehead in a small, tight symbol. Tally's a little too drunk to follow closely, though she gives it her best. She doesn't want to miss a second of this, not a single breath. Not when this woman, the woman, her woman, at least, in her dreams, is touching her, blessing her. It's the closest they've been in months, and Tally isn't sure she'll make it through the blessing, let alone the entire night. Her body is all vibrations and wonder and hot heat she can't seem to shake herself rid of. "I mark you with the sacred spiral of rebirth, drawn with clay of earth," Sarah murmurs to her, and Tally's alcohol and Sarah Alder intoxicated mind immediately supplies her own blessing in return. "I would like to mark you with the sacred spiral of my tongue, please, drawn with my tongue, Tally nearly squeaks at herself, momentarily terrified that every single person in the gazebo and the entire world had heard her very loud, very inappropriate thought. She stiffens and curses inwardly at herself and forces herself calm, focused. Sarah is holding her gaze with steady blue as she slips the small marking stick back into her pocket and takes Tally's wrist again. As the earth receives and holds all elements within, so too do you, Tally. Tally shudders and closes her eyes, curls her fingers up to grasp Sarah's wrists in the same fashion her own are being held. She squeezes and feels the same pulse giving back, feels it drift down her body and beat in her chest, in the base of her spine, in the hardening nub of her focus. You have been the swift lightness of air, ushering in optimism and new life, the strong will and sacrifice of fire, giving of yourself in the service of sisterhood and country, without fear or reservation, the purifying touch of water, cleansing shadows from weary souls with unwavering hope. Tally opens her eyes at the words and finds Sarah steady and watching. A lovely, soft smile glides over Sarah's lips, and Tally feels the slide of it through her own body, drawing her up and easy. As the earth is stable, so too have you been, Sarah says. As the earth is strong, so too have you been. As the earth is nurturing, so too have you been. And as the earth endures, so too have you done and will do. Sarah releases Tally's wrist again to draw the tip of her index finger slowly over the spiral she's made on Tally's forehead. I mark you with the spiral, for you are the rebirth and the reborn, and in you is the power to bring forth new hope. Tally feels her eyes sting with tears and quickly blinks them away, squeezes Sarah's wrist tightly as their arms come together again, and Sarah finishes her blessing. I have spoken, and my word is done, Sarah says. And Tally can hear the work in the words. She can see it, golden and sparkling in the air, like mist. But she barely has a chance to appreciate or even to smile, because Sarah is leaning forward and pressing her lips to Tally's forehead in a whisper-soft kiss right above her spiral. And Tally's knees are going, gone. But Sarah is there, holding her steady, hands suddenly on Tally's waist as Tally's own shoot up to latch onto Sarah's shoulders. Steady, Tally, Sarah whispers. And Tally wants to tell her that steadiness is impossible when she's whispering to her like that, and touching her like that, and kissing her forehead in the same stupid, perfect way she'd probably kissed every other forehead around the circle. Instead, Tally swallows and nods. Sarah smiles at her. Lovely at first, then wider, cockier. Let's sit you down, she says. And Tally plops down too fast and hard for her body to have a chance to summon any grace. Not that it would come even if she tried. When Sarah finally frees her wrists and clears her throat, eyes open around the circle, glancing around, and Tally mourns the loss of her own private moment. Just she and Sarah pressed into a halo of Sarah's work, and the glow of a fire she could pretend no one was warmed by. But them. Now, a blessing for your coven. With the coven blessing complete, Sarah grabs a cushion held out for her by the youngest of her biddies, Joanna, and drops it down into the space between Tally and Abigail. Tally has to physically stop herself from releasing the pleased sound that bubbles in her throat. She'd been certain the general, no, Sarah, would choose to sit by M, their coven leader, or by the biddies even. Instead, she's dropping right down next to Tally, closer than is even remotely necessary, and Tally is absolutely, positively vibrating. So, Sarah says, and Tally feels the brush of her knee against her own. As I said before, no formalities are necessary. Tonight, I'm not your general, but your peer, just a fellow witch here for a good time. Here for a good time, not a long time, eh? Raelle says and raises her goblet, and Abigail, who has been suspiciously quiet since Sarah's arrival, snorts into her wine again. This time, she manages not to actually inhale any of it. Except Sarah's been here a real long time, she says, and Tally dies a little inside. She's about to apologize for her sisters, when Sarah lets out a shockingly loud bark of laughter, and everyone in the interior circle freezes. It's awkward for a moment, a tiny, unsure moment, but then they all ease into a collective laugh that feels like the true start of their night. As I was saying, Sarah chuckles, tonight is about bonding. I truly believe this experience brings us closer and strengthens our ties, not only as fellow witches, but as soldiers in the military. It is so important to remember that, outside of our titles and roles, we are, all of us, human, and humans need connection. We need laughter. Fireside gives us the opportunity to lean into this knowledge and connection and treasure it. So please, feel free to chat with me as you would each other. No need to censor yourselves here or worry about judgment. She smiles at all of them, and it's surprisingly reassuring. Tally even notices Em relaxing, their shoulders sinking and just the slightest edge of intoxication in their slow-growing smile. Thankfully, Sarah continues, I've gotten a chance to know you all fairly well, I think, so this shouldn't be too awkward. Abigail and Gregorio I've known all their lives, and Em for years now. Riel I've gotten to know of late thanks to our work with Isadora, and then, of course, Tally. Sarah's head turns towards Tally, and their gazes lock again. Sarah's affectionate. Tally's trapped somewhere between deer in headlights and come hither. Tally and I know each other very well indeed. The lump that forms in Tally's throat goes down like a rock, not a smooth edge on the damn thing. And if at any point any of you would like to speak with one of my biddies, Sarah says, and you should, because they are all brilliant young witches. She points to the biddy nearest Tally, the eldest, who gives a little wave and a smile. This is Blanche, she points to the next, Lucy, then down the line of the arc, one after the other until she reaches the last. Celine, Enid, Sun, Devon, and finally Joanna. I don't expect you to remember all their names from that, so please feel free to ask. They don't bite. But they hiss, though, Raelle murmurs under her breath, and Gregorio snorts. And then, suddenly, like the surface of water coming to a boil, everyone is laughing again. Even the biddies. Even the general. No, Sarah. Well, for tonight, Sarah says, there will be no hissing. Unless you take away our wine, Blanche says, surprising everyone by speaking aloud, and the entire gazebo roars. Somebody already took my wine, Tally sighs dramatically. Gigi's too, Abigail says, and takes a deliberately long, indulgent drink from her own, non-confiscated goblet. Gigi! Raelle all but shouts and whips her head towards Gregorio, who actually blushes. Only Bells calls me that, Gregorio says, and Abigail grins. Until now, she says, because Raelle is already nodding like she's somehow just legally changed Gregorio's name to Gigi, and thus he can only ever be known as that until the end of time. He groans and looks to Em. Can I please have my wine back? Absolutely, Sarah answers instead, and passes a new goblet to him. She then hands one to Tally. Everyone who wants to drink tonight drinks. Tally is both terrified and delighted by this turn of events. On the one hand, she very much wants to be drinking with her friends, with the biddies, with Sarah, but on the other, she very much does not want to make a fool of herself. Then again, she thinks, she's already hacked up cheese in front of the general, so how much worse can it possibly get? Oh good, Abigail says, because I have an idea for a game. I mean, if you're up for it, Sarah. Tally's stomach buttons out. She can hear it in Abigail's voice. The girl is drunk on the power of a knight as Sarah Alder's equal, calling her by her first name, and now, apparently, calling the shots as well. And Abigail and power are a dangerous combination. Abigail and power and alcohol, goddess help her. Tally's going to pass away like ash on a breeze, easy and unnoticed. Sarah is clearly amused by Abigail's delight in using her given name. Very well, Bells, she says, and the circle erupts with laughter again, except for Tally, whose entire body is riddled with the terror of what is about to come out of her sister's mouth. What game did you have in mind? I was thinking, since we've all got drinks, Abigail says, how about a few rounds of Never Have I Ever? Once again, Raelle brays like a fucking donkey, and Tally descends a level nearer her early grave. Gregorio, or rather Gigi, snorts into his replenished wine, and M turns on Abigail faster than any wind strike could. "Bellwether," they snap. But Sarah is waving her hand to calm them. "Easy now," Sarah says. "While I'm not familiar with the game, I can glean from this reaction, as well as the delighted giggles currently echoing in my head," she glances back towards the biddies, whose laughter suddenly moves from internal to external, and it ripples through the circle again, a little quiet, a little unsure, but also excited, that it tends towards the inappropriate. "You could say that," M says on a sigh, and Sarah smiles, rolls her eyes playfully. "Of course, a bellwether would be pushing limits," she says, and Abigail grins like a wicked little cat pawing at something they specifically told her not to. And how she manages to look so utterly gorgeous while doing so is beyond tally, but she absolutely does. "What?" She plays innocent. "You said there was no need to censor ourselves, Sarah." "Indeed, I did say that," Sarah sighs, then nods her head. "Very well then, though I make no promises to play by whatever rules there may be." And Abigail looks as if she's just seen the white flag of surrender on the horizon, beaming with the brightness of victory. "Wonderful!" She shifts to stretch her long legs out in front of her, crossing at the ankles. "So, Sarah, the rules of the game are as follows. We all go around the circle, taking turns saying something we've never done. Now, if you have done whatever is said, then you have to drink. Pretty straightforward, right?" Sarah gives her nothing more than an amused twitch of her lips and a clipped nod, and Abigail's smile somehow widens. "So, as an example, I'll go ahead and kick us off." She rolls her wine around in her goblet, and she pretends to think. "Never have I ever lived to be 100 years old." Sarah huffs and tips her own wine back, takes a short sip, then licks her lips. "That hardly seems a fair choice, Bells." And Telly is certain that every time Sarah uses the little nickname, Abigail only levels up, and if they have the misfortune of this going on long enough for them to reach final boss levels of Abigail Bellwether, oh no, oh goddess, maybe none of them will survive the night, Sarah included. "I'll try to be less singular going forward," Abigail says, somehow still grossly proper despite how improper she's clearly planning on being and how drunk Telly knows she has to be. "So, now it's your turn, Sarah. So you say..." "Never have I ever," Sarah thinks for a moment, and Telly doesn't miss the way blue eyes dart toward her and stop. Oh no. Oh no. But then the gaze is skirting past and fixing over Telly's shoulder, fallen asleep in the middle of a meeting with the President of the United States. "Oh, shut up," Lucy blurts, then laughs loudly. It's a heavy laugh, the kind that shakes your belly, and it makes Tally's body buzz with joy. The dread dissipates, and she feels a smile pulling at her lips again. They each look back at Lucy, who is rolling her eyes behind the rim of her goblet. She downs her drink. "That was one time, and you are the one who kept us up working the night before, so you only have yourself to blame." Tally and the others are stunned silent for a moment, so unused to the biddies speaking at all, let alone in such a playful, ribbing manner. But it only takes a moment for everyone to relax again and join in, laughing and poking fun and settling into this strange sort of camaraderie that shouldn't exist among such an odd group, but it does, and it is so very good. "You snored," Blanche says, "loudly. You're lucky Sarah didn't strike you down the second we stepped out of the room." "I considered it," Sarah admits, and Lucy laughs into her wine. Her shoulders shake and her eyes roll playfully again. "You know what?" she says, the attitude sounding so out of place in her elderly voice that it only makes it funnier. "You can all just kiss my wrinkled ass." "Have done," Enid says, and wiggles her eyebrows. "Highly recommend." And all at once, the gazebo explodes with sound. Abigail's absolute scream of delight, Em's choking, wine dribbling down their chin, Riel and Gregorio wheezing so hard they visibly shudder, the other biddies singing with laughter, and Sarah's bemused groan of, "No," Telly's own red-hot face and body-jerking laughter. "You will all have to forgive these absolute heathens," Sarah says. "They've been drinking since before the ball, or as Devon called it, pre-gaming." "Okay, so earlier we were dashing and brilliant, and now we're heathens?" Lucy scoffs. "Make up your mind, Sarah." The sound gurgles in Tally's throat again. Oh no. Oh goddess. Not Sarah. Not a cute fucking nickname for Sarah fucking Alder. Sarah Alder. Oh, no. Tally fans her face as laughter spirals the circle again. She feels the joy inside work her up higher and higher. Oh goddess, she'd be floating soon. Tally, Sarah says, and Tally's head snaps toward her. Sarah's smile is toothy and wide, and is wholly dazzling. Sarah's knee bumps against her, then stays there, touching. You look positively scandalized. Still fanning her face, Tally laughs. I just forgot that most witches grow up in openly sex-positive households. Aw, our poor baby Tally in her metrofocal compound, Abigail pouts. Nothing to keep her occupied but her mama's delicious gems. Raelle squeaks into her whine and damn near cries through her laughter. Not the gems, she says. And Tally picks up a cube of cheese and throws it at her. It smacks Raelle in the temple and rolls down the side of her face, which only makes her laugh harder. They were good jams, Tally says, then sighs. She made butters, too. Butters, Gregorio snorts, and Em buries their face in their hands, shoulders bouncing. Jams and butters, Abigail says, but sadly, no boys. Plenty of girls, though, I'm sure, Sarah says, and Tally whirls towards her again, so sharply that she nearly topples herself. Hey, Raelle cheers, and Sarah chuckles at her. When she turns her attention back to Tally, her laugh eases into gentle ribbing. No need to tell us about your secret lovers, Tally, she says, and Tally balks. What? I have... No secrets. Lovers? She chokes on the words. All of them, but especially the last. It doesn't sit on her tongue right. Not when Sarah is looking at her this way. Like she might actually want to know about Tally's non-existent secret lovers. Like she might want to be. No, Tally screams inside. Nope. Tally glances quickly away from Sarah's penetrating eyes and finds Abigail's. Immediately, she regrets looking away at all. Abigail's eyes are so pointed that they may as well be needles firing out of her head and popping through Tally's exterior. Your turn, Tal, she says, and somehow sharpens her gaze further as if to say something. Something Tally is completely missing. Something Tally is too drunk and awkward and terrified to decode. So, she only considers for half-second, before muddling her way through the saddest contribution to the game that has likely ever been made. Never have I ever been to, Ohio. Instantly, Abigail's pointed gaze levels. Her voice drones as she says, Fascinating, Tal. Oh, Tally, the bitty Joanna, the one that had taken Tally's place, says, I feel like I'm truly getting to know you. Sarah chuckles and bumps her knee against Tally's again. Takes a drink. You're not missing much, she says. And Tally settles a bit, eased by Sarah's comfort. Just ask Blanche. She's from Ohio. Boring, Blanche says and takes a sip of her wine. So boring. Just corn and boredom for miles. They all laugh, and Raelle takes up the mantle of the game. Okay, she says, already much too drunk to be playing a drinking game. Then again, so is Tally. So is everyone at this point, she thinks. Except maybe Sarah. Tally's not even sure Sarah can get drunk. Abigail clears her throat, and Tally watches as Raelle's gaze darts over and connects. They share a look, and then Raelle nods, and Tally wants to scream. She sits up straighter and straighter as Raelle's expression goes from blissful to contemplative. Okay, Raelle says again finally. So, back to the good stuff. Uh-oh, Sarah says, and the biddies chuggle. Here we go. Never have I ever. Raelle looks from Abigail to Tally, and a slow smile spreads over her lips, sharpening her scar in the glare of the firelight. She's pale and resting, still dazzling in her midnight blue. And Tally loves her even though she knows she's about to be sacrificed to whatever scheme her sisters have seemingly telepathed to one another. Had a crush on a superior officer. A collective ooh cycles the gazebo, but thankfully, before Tally can feel mortified, she notices every single person but one raising their goblet to drink. Raelle's the only one who doesn't drink. Abigail, Gregorio, Em, and every single one of the biddies each takes a drink. Even Sarah drinks. So, Tally tips her own wine quickly and tries desperately not to feel the sudden sharp burn of blue fire on the side of her face. She feels it anyway, all the way down to her toes. Gregorio's cackling as he shoves Rael's shoulder. "You liar," he says, and Rael puts her hands up. "I swear I haven't." "There's no way," he says. "Gigi, would I lie to you?" "Yeah, I'm gonna need to know who Sarah over here has been crushing on," Abigail interrupts. "Because the last time I checked, you don't have any superior officers." Sarah grins. "I used to." "Ooh," Abigail says. "I demand the deeds." "Absolutely not," Sarah tells her, and Tally laughs out loud. "Thank you, Sarah," she says, forcing herself not to call the woman Sarah. She's positive it would bring about her destruction if she even tried. She blushes regardless. People should tell Abigail no more often. Literally no, they should not, Abigail laughs. Ever. "Okay, but not even Quartermain?" Gregorio suddenly says, still hyper-focused on Rael, who's grinning and still shaking her head. "Have you seen Anacostia Quartermain, though? Like, with your eyes?" Sarah barks out a joyful, loud laugh as another voice suddenly joins them. "What's this I hear about Anacostia Quartermain?" asks the woman herself, stepping up into the segment gazebo, and Gregorio's face absolutely drains. "Nothing?" he squeaks. "Nothing at all, Sergeant, ma'am, Sergeant." "Mm-hmm," Anacostia says, as the others all laugh, and Rael gleefully shoves Gregorio over again. "Sorry I'm late. I thought we'd be starting a bit later." She gives a pointed stare. Tally is surprised to see Sarah's face is the one that colors now. "Yes, well," Sarah says. "I was feeling festive." "I'm sure," Anacostia says. And her knowing eyes dart to Tally. Suddenly, Tally is on fire again. Oh no. What is happening? Surely she's misinterpreting. Surely she's reading too far in. "You're definitely reading too far into it," she drones at herself. "Sarah Alder did not come here early for you. She did not come here for you at all. Get a grip." But then Sarah is shifting towards Anacostia, and Tally's eyes are dropping, drawn to the ripple of Sarah's blazer, to the few extra centimeters of creamy flesh exposed by her movement. And now Tally is trapped, staring and staring at Sarah Alder's naked chest. Tally's stomach is nothing but the bubbling burn of alcohol, and her mind, the internal fog of lust, little demonic voices whispering from somewhere unseen. Titties. Sarah's titties. Sarah Alder's titties. Tally's fucking palms are sweating. "So, what are we talking about?" Anacostia asks as she grabs a cushion from one of the biddies and settles between Em and Abigail. To everyone's surprise, it's Em who grins like a drunk devil and says, "Well, Geek here was just telling us about his crush on—" "No one!" Gregorio shouts. "Nothing!" "Geek," Rael croaks through a laugh, holding her belly and shaking. Abigail laughs with her, snorting into her wine again. "Toad switching from Gigi to Geek," she says, then clears her throat and addresses their newest addition. "We're playing Never Have I Ever." Anacostia shakes her head. "Goddess Sarah, what have you let this bunch rope you into?" "I am but a wee, innocent witch at the mercy of demons," Sarah says, bunching her knees to her chest and smiling like a gleeful child. And Tally barely survives the absolute terror of a heat wave that rockets through her entire body and bubbles her throat with a choked laugh. The others are laughing so hard, it's bordering on screams, and Tally is certain they've got to be disturbing the other covens in their gazebos. But she also cannot even remotely bring herself to care. She's too light, too effervescent. She's floating. Anacostia snorts and settles in. "All right," she says. "I'll give you 3 rounds. But if I drink more than once in 3 rounds, I'm leaving." "Chicken," Celine mutters, and the biddy's eyes immediately widen. She stutters as she says, "That was Sarah, not me." And Sarah positively cackles like the witch she is. Oh no. Telly's in love with this horrible woman. She glances at Rael. Help. Rael glances back. Nah. "Okay, it's my turn," Gregorio says, clearing the air, and raises his goblet as if he's about to give a toast. "Never have I ever been a biddy." "Oh, that's cold," Devon says, as the 7 women seated behind him all drink, and then Sarah's eyes are drawn to Tally's. connecting over the rim of Tally's goblet as she raises it to drink. It's a longer, fuller drink than she intends, but she's frozen in time for a moment, locked on Sarah, and when she swallows, it's thick and choking, but she manages it. But then Sarah's hand settles on her knee and gives it a soft squeeze, and Tally chokes on air instead. Sarah smiles and Tally shudders, because Sarah's hand is still there, still touching her. And even when Sarah looks away again, she doesn't move her hand. It stays cupped around Tally's knee like it belongs there. And Tally's entire body screams, "Hell yeah, it does! You claim that knee, Sarah Alder!" "Aw," Raelle sighs drunkenly and shoves 2 cubes of cheese into her mouth. "Remember Biddy Tally, you guys? She was so cute." There's a hum of agreement from the biddies behind them, and then from Sarah herself, and Tally feels uncomfortable and immense all at once. "Thank you," she murmurs, face hot again, and Sarah gently squeezes her knee. "She's still rather adorable," Sarah says, and Tally absolutely assents. "Thank you," she squeaks again, and avoids the painfully knowing gazes all around the circle. "It's them dimples," Em says, in the most ridiculous cartoon voice, and the moment, thankfully, is speared again with laughter. They take their turn next. Never have I ever gone skinny dipping. Sarah, 2 of the biddies, Abigail, Raelle, Gregorio, and Anacostia all drink. In Boston Harbor, no less, Sarah says. In winter. "Same," Abigail says, and gives Sarah a playful, challenging stare. "On a dare, the Yule before my debut." "Colonial winters were considerably more frigid than the ones you're accustomed to," Sarah challenges back, and Abigail snorts. "When I was your age," she says in a graggy old crone voice, dramatically shaking the hand holding her goblet, "we had to walk 15 miles to the harbor, in 4-foot snowdrifts and bitter wind, with nothing but our bonnets and our chastity and our unwavering love of the Lord to keep us warm." Even Sarah has tears running her cheeks by the time Abigail is finished, and Tally can't even be mortified by her sister's teasing, because Sarah is wheezing and leaning on her, and laughing so hard that her body shakes Tally's into subtle, perfect vibrations. And her hand shifts just the slightest bit higher, from Tally's knee to her thigh, and Tally is absolutely on fire. God is bless these Yule traditions. "Never have I ever," Anacostia begins. Okay. "Never have I ever been a high Atlantic." Abigail rolls her eyes but drinks, along with Gregorio, the biddy named Son, and Sarah herself. "I did know you were a HA, Sarah," Raelle says, then frowns. "Sarah?" She smacks her lips. "Still getting used to that, sorry." Sarah shakes her head, smiling. "Why is it so strange to call me Sarah? It's been my name for over 300 years. "I don't know," Raelle laughs. "I guess it's like if I started calling one of my teachers by her first name. It's just not natural, because I never do it. It also feels kind of disrespectful. I don't know." There's a collective nod around the circle, and Sarah sighs. "Well, my parents would be terribly sad to hear that," she says. "But it isn't sad or serious. It's light and teasing, playful. They clearly found it very respectable." "It's a perfect name," Telly blurts without meaning to, and Abigail and Raelle's laughter burns at her flesh. But Sarah's eyes are on her again, soft and beautiful, and something Tally desperately wants to investigate. So she doesn't care about the laughter. She isn't affected. She's just caught, just captured. And she's whispering now to only Sarah, her lips barely moving, but Sarah's watching them like a hawk. It's perfect. And wait, when did they get so close? When did Sarah's breath get close enough to touch her? Close enough for Tally to smell the tart tang of the wine on her tongue. Oh, goddess, her tongue. A throat sharply clears, and both Tally and Sarah jolt apart like kids caught doing something they ought not to be, and it's Anacostia that's staring at them like the mother who's done the catching. Tally is mortified, desperate for something, anything to rescue her from Anacostia's gaze, from the heavy squeeze of Sarah's hand on her knees, from her own screeching mind and her own traitorous body telling her to lean, to keen, to crawl into Sarah's lap and latch around her like an unholy koala bear and refuse to release her. So she does the first thing she can think of and scrambles for another handful of food, cheeses and olives shoved into her mouth in seconds. "Oh no, Tal," Raelle says, The fire doesn't need any more cheese fuel. And Telly has to physically stop herself from laughing by clamping her jaw and digging her hands down into her own thighs, except now her hand is on Sarah's hand, which is on Tally's thigh, burning through the material of Telly's dress, and Telly tries to retreat, tries to yank her hand away, but feels Sarah's immediately flip and latch on. She suddenly yanks Telly's hand down into the slim space between their bodies, as the biddies begin their turns of the game, everyone's attention elsewhere. Sarah keeps her own attention free and open, so no one suspects or knows that she's silently lacing her fingers through Tally's in that slim space out of sight, hidden by their connected knees, and Telly can't help the shudder that shreds her spine, can't help the thump, thump, thump between her legs. Her eyes slide to meet Sarah's, and Sarah squeezes her fingers. Her eyeliner is a little smudged from laughing herself to tears, and her lips are wine-wet and reddened, and she looks so incredibly loose and sexy that Telly doesn't think she'll ever recover from the sight. She doesn't think she'll ever breathe again if she can't summon the will to look away. "Swallow, Tally," Sarah whispers, and the last olive left on Tally's tongue damn near chokes her into another coughing fit, but she somehow manages to force it down her throat as Sarah's mischievous smile spreads. The game goes round and round, and nearly every never have I ever results in Sarah drinking. After 300 years of life, there aren't many things Sarah Alder hasn't done, and unfortunately for Sarah's liver, Abigail takes up that fact as if it's some kind of challenge. She throws whatever she can think of at Sarah, appropriate or not, and Telly can't even be mad at her, because Sarah and the biddies are just so willing to tell them little stories and indulge their own. Because Sarah is smiling and laughing and leaning on Tally like she needs to, even though Tally knows she doesn't, because Sarah is Sarah, just Sarah, and Tally is just Tally, and it feels, for once, like they could be that way, stay that way, forever. Some of their turns are a little more serious. Never have I ever gone to war. But most are light-hearted and hilarious. Never have I ever had to shit in a chamber pot. Honestly, Bellwether, you're horrible, Sarah says as she, not for the first time, is the only one to drink. And all the while Abigail laughs like the pawn of Hades himself, her evil glow magnified by the fire's flickering yellows and reds. By the time they make it to 6 times round, it's ridiculously late, and Tally is messy drunk. So is nearly everyone else, except Sarah, who is only tipsy, but she is very obviously that. Because she's given up all pretense and all measures of secrecy and is now openly holding Tally's hand atop her thigh, fingers laced together like they're dating or something. And Tally is just sitting like a bewildered wild animal brought into someone's home, too stunned to move, and utterly unsure if she should be terrified or delighted. She's definitely both. Never have I ever ignored my sisters because I was too busy thirsting after Sarah Alder. Both Tally and Sarah startle, whipping around toward Raelle, whose eyes are widening by the nanosecond, her words still hanging in the air like a death knell. And later, weeks later, she will swear it wasn't as bad as it was, but in the moment, even Raelle herself is horrified by the words that have escaped her mouth. She slaps a hand over her lips as Abigail screeches, and Acostia mutters something along the lines of, "Oh, hell no." Em and Gregorio busy themselves with a sudden slurred discussion about the architecture of the gazebo, and the biddies cackle like a bunch of old hags, clearly elated by this dire turn of events, and all the while, Tally just chugs the hell out of her drink, and Sarah watches with wide, dark blue eyes that are filled with equal parts amusement and what Tally would swear to the goddess herself is arousal. No one has a chance to say a word about it, though, because the second Tally's drink is gone, she slams down her goblet, launches messily to her feet, and squeakily announces, "I have to pee," before scampering off on wobbly knees and ankles, and praying to the goddess she doesn't trip and fall on her face in front of the woman she's just basically admitted to wanting, desperately, as if it isn't bad enough that she's already nearly died by way of cheese cube, wasted one of her game turns on Ohio, of all things, and spent the majority of the night painfully clenching her asshole closed, terrified, thanks to Raelle, that she was going to accidentally fart in front of Sarah Alder. Tally scurries out of the gazebo in her bare feet and races towards the banquet hall, shouting, "Shit! It's cold out here!" as she goes, Because it is. Holy goddess, it is. She picks up her pace, hoping beyond hope that the hall is still open, because it's the closest building to them, and she really does need to pee. But the lights are all off. The other gazebos are empty, and as she draws farther from her own, she hears the distant echoes of Sarah telling them they ought to be off to bed and thanking them for a fun and enlightening evening. The banquet hall is locked. Damn it. So Tally jogs in her dress, drunk and shivering, to the next building over, the mess hall. It's blessedly open, and Tally only rams into 2 tables and 1 chair as she finds her way to the bathroom in the dark. Tally? Abigail's slurred voice crackles through Tally's ears in far speech, and Tally screams in the bathroom as if someone's just burst in on her midstream. She huffs and calms and resituates herself on the toilet. What? She calls back, not entirely sure that she's even doing it right. Though they'd only just learned to transmit a week or so after Samhain, and she hadn't had many opportunities to practice. Alder, incoming! Rael's voice suddenly screeches in, staticky and adding to Abigail's still muttering in the background. Not a second later, Tally hears the bathroom door creak open, and nearly screams again. She knows. She knows who it is, but she's still torn between feeling terrified and aroused. Equal parts horror movie girl and romance movie girl, both caught and cornered. Tally? Oh, that voice. Just a second. Tally manages to choke out, and tries not to die, because Sarah fucking Alder is listening to her pee, and she can't stop peeing. Of course, Sarah says, until he hears the slightest drunken slur in her voice. It's sexy, because of course it is. Of course it is. When Tally finishes and finally exits the stall, she finds Sarah in her sex goddess suit, leaning casually against the wall near the sinks, waiting for her. Tally glances quickly to her left and right, even though she knows she's the only one here. But she just has to make sure. Yes, Sarah Alder is waiting for her. Hi, Tally says, and wobbles her way over to the sink to wash her hands. Hi, Sarah returns easily, practically lounging against the wall. When Tally turns off the sink, Sarah snatches a paper towel from the nearest dispenser and meets Tally halfway. She pulls Tally's hands between hers and begins to dry them herself. You realize it's disgusting to enter a public restroom with no shoes on, yes? She asks, and Tally feels her soul exit her body. Yes, she admits, mortified. But I really don't think I could walk in my shoes right now, even if I had them with me. Sarah smiles fondly, and Tally wants to stare at that smile. She wants to, but instead her drunken gaze makes its way, once again, down the delightful path of Sarah's throat, and down to that naked chest again. Abigail was right, Tally, Sarah says quietly after a moment, and Tally's eyes flit back up. What do you mean? Sarah grins. When she said your boner was showing. Tally chokes on nothing, and then Sarah is devouring her space in one quick step, hands threading up into Tally's loose hair, knocking the holly crown from her head. Sarah's nose is brushing against hers, and Sarah's chest, her skin, is touching Tally's dress and consuming Tally's entire world, and Tally absolutely cannot breathe. Oh, goddess, she stutters, and Sarah chuckles low in her throat. Oh, goddess indeed, she murmurs against Tally's lips, not quite touching, but close, so close. Slowly, one of Sarah's hands slips down and latches onto one of Tally's. She pulls it up to the bare expanse of exposed flesh between her breasts and settles it there. Since you can't stop staring, you might as well touch, she whispers, and every drop of liquid in Tally's body spirals towards her cunt like a tornado. She's wrecked in seconds. But before she can even begin to think, or, dare she dream, slide her hand toward, Sarah's pulling away again and clearing her throat. Devon has your shoes, she says. Come. We'll walk you back to the dorms. Are you serious? Tally squeaks before she can stop herself, and Sarah turns back. Tally? You can't just say that, and do that, and act like you're going to kiss me, and then just not? And then Sarah is laughing again. rich and bright like Yule music tinkling and chiming in Tally's ears. She feels it in her chest and in her bones, in the mark still spiraling her forehead carved by Sarah's finger, in the call Sarah made and Tally answered, vibrating in Tally's blood since the moment hot metal dropped into her hand. "Tally," Sarah says, "I won't have our first kiss be in the mess hall bathroom when you are drunk and I am, well, also drunk, and the biddies are right outside thinking that's exactly what's going to happen. I must disappoint someone tonight. It is my way." She then turns on her fancy white heels and disappears from the room, leaving Tally to gape after. "Wait," she blurts and jolts after Sarah. "So we are going to kiss?" When she follows Sarah back out into the cold night, the moon is new and hidden, the sky speckled but deep, near aphotic. The air is cold and the earth is frozen, but the darkest night is still somehow bright, because Sarah is smiling, and Tally is floating, and the spirit of Yule is ringing in their blood. Tally had been right to be excited all along, for the coming new year now certainly seems promising. Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.